But what I would like to start off with today is to introduce our fabulous presenter, Brittany Carenti, who's the Director of Behavioural Research at Minter Ellison and also works at the Adelaide University. I forget the order of the names because of the recent change to the name of Adelaide University, where she works there and is undertaking her PhD.
Yeah, so I'm really excited to share with you all today the Know How to Implement Theory framework. It's really just looking at how can we improve implementing theory and behavior change strategies or in general in practice as well. How I'm going to go over the presentation today is I'm going to start with an overview of the paper itself and the theoretical model and some of the thinking behind this problem. And then I'm going to go through some of the materials and the hands-on tools that I've developed to be able to help practitioners to actually take that abstract concept of theory and apply it in a really grounded and structured way. And I'll go through an example of what that looks like as well, an example of using the tools. And then we'll do questions at the end. So if we start off with just thinking about why we should use theory in practice and why this problem matters, is there's a lot of investment in social impact campaigns globally. There's a lot of interest towards it across governments and within industry. However, these campaigns are often quite large and they can hold a lot of financial, social, even political risk. So it's really important to ensure that these campaigns actually work. And a lot of governments and even industry are very conservative when it comes to risk. So, one of the most effective tools that you can use for risk mitigation is actually the application of theory. And the reason for that is that theory provides a really robust evidence base of effective techniques. So instead of trying to reinvent the wheel every time and do a whole heap of empirical research just to understand some of the basic things that we actually already know from existing literature, is we can use it as a technique to really shortcut a lot of that and go, there's all these studies that actually say that this works. And so then we can adapt it to our context. And it just gives us a really solid foundation to start from and minimizes the time and the effort and the resources required to get some of this knowledge. Sometimes you can get strategies that backfire and interventions that backfire. So it sort of helps to pre-account for that and not accidentally do something that can go wrong. So the issue is that while we know that theory is best practice for social impact campaigns, it's really commonly recognized, and there is a general consensus that evidence-based approaches are really good and effective. Theory does remain underutilized in practice. And while there are definitely practitioners that do use theory and use it well, unfortunately, research has shown it's only about 20% of interventions that use theory and to varying degrees of success within that. So there is this gap between the knowledge that theory is good and then actually implementing it in practice. So reasons for this include a general lack of knowledge of relevant theories. So you get a lot of practitioners, they might not have that set in their mind of theories that are really useful, or they might not know how to translate these really abstract concepts into practice. You can also get practitioners that have really old school theories and they only have like a very small set of them and they just reuse those theories continuously instead of trying to think of perhaps other ways to approach it. There is also a general time poorness that comes with industry and being a practitioner. In my 8 years of experience as a practitioner, I have never met another researcher who has used a theory. And these are researchers, even with PhDs, people that are familiar with academic techniques. But there is this general time poorness when you're expected to turn around empirical work in like 2 or 3 months. So it can create this real barrier. Previous literature has attempted to educate practitioners and to teach them how to apply theory in practice. However, there's still this gap. There's still a lot of research saying that practitioners are just not using it. And a lot of this is because previous literature tends to present their advice on how to bridge this gap in this really abstract, sort of high level way. and they're not actually addressing the barriers that practitioners have. So, to try and resolve this, this research adopts both a theoretical perspective, but really takes a practitioner focus. And this is based on my own hybrid experience, where I'm really looking to develop ways that will resonate with practitioners. So, the overall question that I had in my mind was how might we better facilitate the use of theory and social impact approaches specific to practitioners? Um, and so, from a theoretical perspective, what I was looking at here was undertaking a conceptual approach, specifically a theory adaptation approach. So, what theory adaptation aims to do is it first problematizes existing theories and frameworks and looks to find weaknesses within them and go, what is actually the reason that these frameworks are not working to bridge that gap? And then I take another theory that is strong, where these other theories are weak, to supplement it and to be able to integrate these theories together in a way that actually evolves theoretically and creates a more robust framework. So the main theory that I focused on as my sort of base theory to problematize was the SMT model. So this is the social marketing theory-based approach model. And the reason why I chose this is it just provides a really solid framing in that it is a decision-making process of theory selection and application. And so it's a great theory just to use as sort of like a foundational basis that then we can evolve from. However, this theory does have some significant weaknesses, which actually a lot of the existing theories also have. So, the first sort of problematic area in this theory is so in the information search stage. So, the first stage of this model is you're finding theories. So, you've just started your initiative and you're thinking through what theories can I apply, and either you have a set of theories in your head that maybe you can choose from, or you need to do a literature review. To be able to find that collection of initial theories. Then you go into the evaluation of theories. So you're shortlisting, seeing which ones might be appropriate. Theory selection is then when you're actually choosing that theory. And theory-based design then is the application of that theory. So in the information search is where we see this sort of first problematic area, which is that there's a general assumption that practitioners have sufficient knowledge of useful theories. They have an existing catalog of theories in their mind, or they're able to perform a systematic or even just a normal literature review to identify such theories. However, systematic reviews and literature reviews are really academic techniques. And there may not be the skills known how to actually do that, or even just the time required for a proper literature review can be really intensive. And if you have no familiarity, or this isn't something that you're doing really often, not only are we asking them to do a literature review, we're asking them to learn how to do a literature review. And these are things that is just not always possible within an industry or a practitioner context. So that's the first sort of problematic area here. And this assumption is prevalent in a lot of literature, where there is a general assumption that practitioners, yeah, they know theories and they know how to look for theories. The second problematic area is in the application stage, where there is this assumption that practitioners know how to successfully and critically apply a theory. But this is a skill that's generally acquired in postgrad degrees. And even there is this growing trend of a theory deficit where we're getting a lot of students leaving universities and they're not able to actually apply theory in a critical way. The amount of times I've heard other researchers say, we learned all these theories and frameworks in uni and they're useless. We just never apply them. I've never had to write a marketing plan or anything like that. It's quite concerning in my mind, and a little bit sad, I guess, that they don't realize the value of theory and these existing frameworks and how they can make your life so much easier and they can really improve the quality of your interventions. So there's this second sort of problematic area. So I turned then to social practice theory as a theory to help supplement this. And I use this to identify the barriers between theory and practice, and then to sort of guide then what needed to be done to bridge that gap. So it posits that there are three criteria that need to be satisfied in order to be able to practice. So the first one is around meanings. So having a belief that theory is good. Um, not every practitioner does have this. However, there is a general consensus, especially at the sort of broader like government and industry level, that theory-based approaches and evidence-based approaches are effective and good tools. I consider this step as a prerequisite to the rest of the framework because if you don't believe that theory is going to be a good and effective tool, why would you ever want to learn how to use it and to integrate it? So in this case, I see it, yeah, mostly it is satisfied. You might get a few people that don't believe it, but yeah, it's a prerequisite to this. So then we look at competencies, which basically says to behave or to be able to do something, you need the skills and the knowledge required to be able to actually perform that behavior. So in this case, practitioners or a lot of practitioners don't have this. They don't have the knowledge of existing theories or the skills to be able to search for these theories and apply them. Then there's materials. So materials talks about how you need the hands-on tools, guidelines, templates to be able to actually behave and to translate theory into practice, which is also something that's missing, as a lot of existing literature gives advice in this really high-level academic way. It's not super grounded, super step by step. So while SMT and a lot of these other theory-based approaches are attempting to facilitate the application of theory and practice, practitioners just are not able to comply and to be able to do this because they don't have enough competency and material support. So in other words, current frameworks, they don't provide the know-how for practitioners to be able to easily use theory. So when I combine the SMT and the SPT frameworks together, it forms what I call the KIT framework. So the know how to implement theory framework. So on this first level, you can see the social marketing theory-based approach, which gives us our decision-making steps and that high-level sort of outline of what is the theory selection and application process. The second line then describes how we use social practice theory to describe the observed gaps between SMT and the application of theory. And then at the bottom is the practical contributions that I have provided to give guidelines and templates and tools to be able to bridge that gap and to create that element of SPT that's actually needed to behave. So in the first one, we have information search, so just looking for theories, and that there is currently a gap in the sufficient knowledge of the existence of theories or how to search for them. So to address this, I have created an explicit card deck of widely applicable theories that can be used for a lot of different social impact campaigns, and can basically sort of bypass the need for things like a literature review or any sort of extensive search by going like, here is a list of really robust theories that can be used in a lot of different circumstances, and then have practitioners focus on like which theory is going to be best for their use case and for like to fit with their problem instead, or overcoming some of those barriers of time poorness and some of potential skill issues as well. And then the last stage, so the theory application sort of stage, there is that issue with materials where there's that lack of instrumental tools to be able to actually apply the theories in an effective way. So to address this, I have developed a template and guidelines for how to integrate theories into a social impact campaign with like step-by-step steps on how to do this. And it was derived from a similar template that I designed for a first year behavioral economics unit. And I figured if students can learn to do it, first year students, anyone can learn to do it. So, just talking a little bit more about the deck of key behavior change theories. So, there is existing literature that says that the criteria for choosing a theory is for behavior change is based on things like is there proven predictive capability, is there effectiveness on outcomes, and a focus on behavior change rather than attitudes. So all of the theories chosen in this card deck already satisfy that criteria. And yeah, instead, practitioners are asked to think of things like, is this theory going to be applicable to my problem? I think as well, it's important that you find a theory that resonates with you, one that you can easily understand and explain, and even one that really sparks ideas. I think it's a great theory if it can really help you to guide your creative process. You're just going to connect a lot more with it and come up with better ideas that way. And so for materials, this is the template that I have designed for using theory when designing an intervention. So there's a blank template available, and there is one that's filled out with an example. And what this does is it just sort of breaks down different parts of a high level behavior change campaign. And it's designed in the style of a pitch, like that of a case competition or a hackathon. And the idea is to get practitioners integrating theory and just getting their hands on and just trying it and doing it at like a high level in a way that you can ideate this in like an hour sort of thing. So just getting them used to it and using a real foot in the door technique. Um, yeah, just to getting that, get them like used to it and practicing. So I'll get more into now and like an example of how to actually use that template and how to use the card deck in combination together. And I'll show it with an example. So we'll start off with the first section of the template, which is the behavioral problem. So at this point, a practitioner would be listing out some key points about the problem that they have. So who's the target audience? When is the behavior occurring? What is the behavior? And like why is this behavior occurring? So just including any key elements that might affect the intervention. So in this example, we'll say that young Australians are increasingly struggling to stay out of debt. Reasons for this include a lack of foundational understanding of budgeting, saving, managing credit, all these things that are making them vulnerable to accumulating high interest debts, and they're just really trapped in the cycle of debt. So then the next stage is thinking about, okay, so we have this idea of what the problem is, and we have some ideas for why this might be occurring. We now need to categorize these barriers and motivators using a theory. So a barrier is something that is inhibiting them from behaving. So why is the target audience not behaving? And a motivator is something that you can use to encourage them to behave. So we're going to take these things that we've come up with in the problem, like a lack of foundational understanding of budgeting and saving, and categorize that using a theory. And what that allows us to do is understand what are the underpinning mechanisms or the reasons why someone is not behaving. So if we're finding that, for example, a lot of people are not behaving for really social reasons like peer pressure, a lot of pressure in their community or in their social groups, then you're not going to design an intervention that's based on education because maybe these people already know that the behavior is wrong and that they need to do this other behavior, but that's not actually the barrier that needs to be addressed. So at this stage, when you're choosing a theory to categorize barriers and motivators, you can choose a theory from the shortlisted theory deck. So obviously, if you want to do a literature review, you can, but the theory deck has sort of um, taken over that information search stage and it's gone, here's a bunch of theories that you can sort of use as a starting place. So the theory card deck is categorized into three types of theories. So the first one and the one used at this stage is the explanatory theory. So these are theories that describe what is the nature of a behavior and specifically why are people behaving in that way, and it provides you the mechanisms to understand that. So use this to categorize your barriers and motivators. You then have a change theory, which we'll talk about a little bit more later when we get to it. But the difference between them is that an explanatory theory talks about why a behavior is occurring, and a change theory talks about how to actually change that behavior. So you also have this dual theory, which is basically both of them. So it can both explain why a behavior is occurring and how to change that behavior. So if this is someone's first time using theory in this way, I would definitely recommend a dual theory because you can use it at all stages of the strategy, whereas an explanatory theory you can only use for barriers and motivators, and a change theory you can only use for designing your intervention. So it's a little bit harder to marry up two theories together than one. But for the sake of this example, we'll say, okay, we're looking maybe at the explanatory theories, and the criteria that we have is we're thinking about what theories might be useful in terms of fit with the problem, target group, and campaign objectives. So we've chosen social support theory, and we think that this one's going to fit in with our campaign really well because we can clearly see how to categorize our barriers and motivators using this. So we think that there might be some issues maybe around informational support, so they don't have advice and guidance on how to budget and save, and maybe they don't have the tools and materials for that hands-on help as well. So, social support theory is a framework that suggests 5 types of support that people need to enact change. Different problems will have different emphasis on different types of support, but it's just a really nice, relatively easy way to just categorize your barriers and motivators. And it helps practitioners to identify what type of support is needed and thus what type of change or what is needed to be able to change. So, going back to our barriers, so we say they have a barrier of a lack of financial education. So we categorize that as an informational barrier because they don't have the knowledge of what is actually needed to budget and to save. Then we also find that there's a lack of tools for young people to be able to quickly and easily manage their budgets. So that's an instrumental barrier because it's talking about hands-on support. Then we have our motivators. Maybe in this problem, we have identified that these young people are really wanting a sense of control and financial security. So that's an emotional motivator where they're really wanting to get this sense within themselves of like pride and control. So then we get to the next stage, which is okay, we've identified our barriers and our motivators. How do we actually change this behavior? How do we actually make it so that they can effectively budget and save? So at this stage, we would either use the same theory if it was a dual theory, or we would choose a new one, specifically a change theory. So the criteria at this stage is the same as the previous one, where we're choosing from our shortlisted deck and we are considering which theories might be useful. So with this change theory, this is really about theories that give us a mechanism to actually be able to shift behavior. So whether this is identifying the processes, strategies, or conditions that enable people to move from current to desired actions. So we've looked through this, we've looked through the card deck, and we have landed on the EAST framework. And the EAST framework is a framework that describes a series of different behavioral nudges, which can be used to passively encourage positive behaviors. And the thinking behind EAST is that to make a behavior desirable and to make someone do the behavior, you have to make the desired behavior easy, attractive, social, and timely. So there's a whole bunch of different nudges within this, and the full set can be seen with a link, which is provided on the card as well. But I've given some examples within the card of some potential easy nudges that can be used. So then we have to think of what our actual intervention is. And at this point, we're thinking through like what are the different steps in the intervention at a high level, and how do we actually use the East framework or the theory that we've chosen to come up with this intervention. So we might go, cool, so I want an easy nudge and I'm going to choose a default nudge. So if you want someone to behave, you make that behavior the default behavior. So in this example, we might go, we're going to do an AI plugin for a banking app that tracks patterns and develops an optimum budget by default. So this is not something that the user has to enable, it's already enabled. And then maybe it suggests how much money they can spend on different categories. User might go, yep, looks good. And then it automatically transfers savings into a separate account. So by making the desired behavior a default behavior that is not something that the user actually has to actively do, we are more likely to encourage them to behave and to be successful in that goal. So we might go also, okay, well, maybe we want to put in an attractive nudge into this intervention as well. So people behave really well when there are rewards. So we might say if they reach their budgeting goals each month, so they are saving X amount of money, then they can have a point towards a streak, and then a 12-month streak gets a $100 gift card or whatever it is. And then there is a timely nudge. So there's the just-in-time nudge, which says that by giving people an intervention at exactly the time is when they were going to do the negative behavior, or in a time when they can actually properly engage and concentrate on this, then you are able to more successfully get them to do the behavior and to process that information. So, for example, we might put in a pop-up tip that only triggers when a user's action indicates that a tip is actually going to be relevant. So if it's just after payday and they haven't, or it is payday and they haven't spent that money yet, that's when you would trigger a pop-up that told the user to select a new savings plan or to adjust their budget or something like that, like doing it when they actually have the ability to act. So that's great. We have an intervention and we have an idea, but does it actually address the barriers? And I think that it's really important to go back to this step and to reflect on it and make sure that every step of this strategy is interconnected. That's the only way that using theory is going to actually be effective, is if we're going back and we're saying, okay, we've come up with this idea. Does it actually address the informational and the instrumental barrier? So we say the informational barrier, which was the lack of knowledge around budgeting and saving. We do provide that informational help through pop-up tips that come up at a relevant time, so they will actually be read and understood. So we think that this will overcome this barrier. Then the instrumental barrier, which is providing hands-on tools. By the app suggesting a personalized default budget and automatically transferring money, and by it integrating with tools that they already use, we believe that we have provided that hands-on help. Then with the motivators, we think that we have given them a sense of control through seeing visually that they are reaching their goals each month and that they're on track to regaining that financial freedom and control. And then just on the second page of the strategy sheet, we also talk a little bit about viability and goals. So just sort of reflecting and thinking, are there any benchmarking metrics? How do we measure success? How do we know that this will succeed? So adding in some realism and making sure our interventions are really grounded and realistic and practical. And feasibility as well. So just considering budget, resources, are there any grants available? Is there existing resources that we can leverage and use? Things like that. So the whole strategy sheet is designed very, very similarly to a pitch or a case competition, including this section. So the overall contributions of this research, firstly, is that as it was written by a hybrid academic practitioner for practitioners, the KIT framework really aims to address those barriers of adoption to theory and practice by giving those hands-on resources that are needed to use theory. And then secondly, the integration of social practice theory and the social marketing theory-based approach model allowed us to identify where those barriers were in the adoption journey and how to bridge the gap. And this overall increases the robustness through the introduction of KIT. So I provided two different links here. So if you are interested in downloading the free templates, like the strategy sheet and the card deck, you can go to my website and do that. The card deck is still in development, so it's not available yet, but you can sign up to be notified when it is. And also, if you're interested in suggesting theories for the card deck, so I'm really focused on theories that are really practical, useful, easy to use, so really grounded theories that a beginner can pick up and just start using. Feel free to go to the second link to the form, and yeah, please suggest some. That would be really awesome. So